Could the Washington Commanders bolster the line with their first pick in the NFL draft? Well, we're going to take a look at the big boys here on Ref the District. Let's go. Greetings and salutations and welcome to Ref the District. I'm Nathan Perry. That's the Stoner, and we're about to be talking about the big boys. It's offensive linemen at the top of the NFL draft here on Ref the District as we go down and we talk about our top five. Now, there is some question about whether or not Washington would go offensive linemen. I'm always a big fan of taking the big guys, build up the trenches, and you want the right guys at the helm. Now, Stoner, the offensive line, though, was pretty competent last year. Not great, not outstanding. Wasn't like the top five line or anything like that.
Sure.
But, they did add Laramie Tunsil in the offseason. That moves Brandon Coleman over to the right tackle spot. Wiley shifts over to cover for Sam Cosmi while he recovers from injury. Allegretti is your boy over on the left side. Yep. And they got Mr. Badass in the center. Pardon my language for those who might not like that kind of language, but that's what the team calls him, Biotish, out in center. All of these guys under contract for a couple of years, Stoner. So why would they even bother going for a lineman here at pick 29?
This is a great case study, I think, in best player available / draft for need. And we all know, we've talked about it ad nauseum on our show. We've talked about it that it's not as simple as that. It's a very simplistic take that we do sometimes when we say, I'm a very much a draft for need guy. You're very much a draft best player available guy. It's not that simple. There's a whole lot of complex situations that feed into it, data and all that. But this is a really good case study in that if there's an offensive lineman available at pick 29, is Washington going to go for it and take one of those guys? Because the general thinking is that you can never have enough offensive linemen, and that's fair. I totally agree with that. But you have to get value with your pick at 29. And Adam Peters has come in, and he has essentially completely rebuilt the offensive line since he got here through all manners, through drafting, through free agency, and through trades. As you talked about already, Laramie Tunsil at left tackle was brought in via trade. Nick Allegretti was brought in as a free agent. He's got 2 years left on his deal. Same with Tunsil at left tackle, 2 years left on his deal. Center Tyler Biotish was brought in as a free agent, 2 years left on his deal. Sam Cosmi, who they did not draft, but they did give an extension to. That was Adam Peters that gave him an extension. 4 years left on his deal. And then they're moving Brandon Coleman, at least for now, over to right tackle that they drafted in the third round, Nathan. He's not a guy that they, a Chris Paul that they picked up in the sixth round in hopes of developing him or keeping him as a backup. They brought him in the third round as a starter, hopefully at some point. And he's got 3 years left on his deal. So I think their thought process is that this is exactly what we want based on what we've done in the offseason is we want these 5 offensive linemen. They've all got at least 2 years left on their deals right now. Why in the world would we draft a guy, an offensive lineman, this year to essentially, best case scenario, sit for 2 years and never play for 2 years? Obviously, you have someone there as a backup, but do you want to draft a guy to be a backup for 2 years? I think that's where it comes in. If you've got a couple of guys available at 29, Nathan, offensive linemen who are maybe the best player available, I don't think you can do that in this draft. Or even if it's 36 or 44, wherever they end up drafting their first pick. I just have to caution that this team has made their intention known that they are going for it. They are giving up draft picks, Marshawn Lattimore, Deebo Samuel, Laramie Tunsil, to go for it now with Jaden Daniels. And to go with your most valuable asset in the draft right now and take a backup, I don't see it. I don't see the logic in it, Nathan.
Well, I think the reason why you're not seeing the logic in it is because I think if you pick a guy at 29, that guy's not the backup. That guy is going to be the starter, and one of those ones that you named will be taking a back seat. Really, the ones that you're looking at there would probably be Coleman, who's a 3rd-round pick last year, who could sit for a year and develop behind a more talented 1st-round pick, or you move Coleman into guard and let Wiley be a backup, or Allegretti, who I personally am not the highest on.
Yeah.
So much so I often mispronounce his name, not intentionally, but it does happen quite a bit here in Ref the District. And that guy is a 2-year backup. You have him for 2 years because offensive linemen are needed, and you want quality depth because we've seen it before when you have guys dropping off. And last year we were on like left tackle number 3 after Coleman saw some injury time, after oh my goodness, sorry, long time. Lucas saw some injury time. Like we had to see Trent Scott out there, and then like there was a whole mess on the line. So feeding the big boys to me is never a bad idea, and you can build up a quality line. I agree, it's not a glaring need, and I would even go as far as to say that, I mean, looking at the list of players, this is not a draft like last year where you had a lot of quality linemen. You have some decent ones, and you have ones that we're going to mention today in our top 5 that will probably not be available when Washington picks at 29. But this draft, I very much can see at least 3 of these guys, even though their average draft position currently is ahead of where Washington picks at 29, that they're going to be available, because these are every single one of these players, even the ones that are left tackles, are probably guards. And when you have that designation, and honestly, that's when you start to see falling. You don't take a developmental left tackle in the 1st round. You take that guy in the 1st round. So a lot of these guys, I wonder where they're going to fall, because while a couple of these are in the top 10, my 1 and 2 are being drafted in the top 10 right now, the average draft position on mock drafts. They very well could slide, just because there's just no telling when they might just be a guard. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get into the list. We can continue this type of conversation on our Wednesday show, and we encourage you to join us there live every Wednesday, 7:30 Eastern, right here on YouTube and Facebook. Now, I'm not going to mention one guy outside of this right now. He was in my also ran list, which was Gray Zabel. The Z-Man, just missing out. He is an actual guard. I think they might have him at tackle, listed at tackle, but this is one of those ones that was just like, he's definitely going to be a guard, but we're going to list him at tackle. And he had a lot of good traits, but he missed out. He missed out because I went with a different guard. In fact, the number 1 rated guard, actual guard, and that's Tyler Booker here, mainly because he's got a lot of power and he's high IQ. Not necessarily the most athletic guy, but the guy is a road grader. And when you're looking at the guard and you're looking at what Washington wanted to be able to do, and that's push those big bodies, and Tyler Booker would allow Washington to do that. And so that's why I have him listed at number 5 on our list. In fact, the only true guard on the list. Spoiler alert. What did you like about Tyler Booker when you were looking at him?
Yeah, I like Tyler Booker quite a lot. Like, you play at Alabama and you start for Alabama for a while. You're obviously a darn good football player. What I liked about him is that he was versatile. He played both tackle and guard, but he's definitely going to be a guard. And I have him listed in the same spot, Nathan. I think of the 5 offensive linemen that we're going to talk about, I'd put him at number 5 as well. Mostly, I guess, probably because he's a guard. He's excellent versus the pass. What I've seen watching him is that he does struggle a little bit in that run game. Not because he doesn't have the strength or the power, but that he just does struggle in the run game and that he's very good in pass pro. But he does also struggle versus the blitz. There's a few things there that are noteworthy in terms of his struggles. But look, he went from in his freshman year just to being a rotational player to he became a team captain, an All-American type guy at Alabama. So you got to like the progress when you want to see from these guys is having them get better and better. Last year, he had 87 knockdown blocks in 1 year. 87.
Pancakes.
Yeah, that's pretty darn good. So I like what he does in pass pro. He's got a ways to go in the ground game. But again, like you said, not because he doesn't have the strength and power, but just he's got a lot to learn in that. And if Adam Peters is going to want to take a guy, he's going to want a run first kind of guy rather than a pass protection kind of guy. So I think he's going to be there. I don't think he's a guy they're going to consider at 29. But when we're talking offensive line prospects of the 5 that we're talking about, I also have him at number 5.
Yeah, his average draft position was 31. So he's actually the one guy who, in most cases, will be available for Washington at 29. I agree. He's nowhere near the best player available at that time. And even in a trade back, I wouldn't look at picking up a guy like Tyler Booker. Probably not until the 50s, personally, the way that I've seen things. But out of the prospects that we had looking for, he did come at number 5 for us. Beating him out was Josh Simmons, who's got some pedigree over there with the Buckeyes and the length and competitive nature to play at the next level. Now, this is a tackle and not a guard. What do you make of potentially going after a tackle? Because like I said, the only guard on my list was Tyler Booker. We're going all tackle. So let's get that conversation out right now. What do you make of taking a tackle at 29, and will how's that offer some flexibility for the Commanders?
What's crazy about these 5 guys is that of the 5 guys we're talking about, Tyler Booker, the only real guard, actually has the longest arm of all of these guys, and he's going to be a guard. The problem with all of these guys and why you don't have a Joe Alt, right, or a J.C. Latham from Alabama last year, or Fashanu, those guys from Penn State last year, who were all drafted top 11, because these guys don't have the prototypical long arms. And while you might think, well, who cares? You don't need, can you play tackle or can't you play tackle? That's fair. But these awesome edge rushers, they take advantage of these tackles with the shorter arms. That's why they don't normally play the tackle position, because they'll struggle against these guys. And Josh Simmons is a perfect example of that. He has 33-inch arms. The length of his arms aren't great, but I mean, he's 6'5", 317. He's a big dude. He started 26 consecutive games until a knee injury. And that knee injury is what has got people talking about him in the late first round, early second round, or else he'd probably be a top 10 sort of pick, because he's got all the attributes. He's got the stats. He's got the measurables that you want other than the arm length. So because he's a guy coming off an injury and he didn't play Michigan and he didn't play in the bowl in the playoffs, he didn't play the meat of their schedule. And so you didn't get to really evaluate him in this last year against those top line defensive players. And so I think that's what you are worried about. But what you did saw of him, you got to like him. His foot speed's there. He's very fluid. He's got a great first step and a punch. I like a lot about him. I'm worried about that injury. Obviously, everybody's going to be worried, but guys overcome these injuries all the time. But if Washington's looking for a guy to jump in on day one, which is what you're hoping for with pick 29, this is not the guy. He's going to be another guy who's going to be working on that injury, coming back from an injury, and he needs a little bit more time. And he's played both the left side and right side. I like him. I know a lot of people would say take him at 29. I'm not that guy.
Yeah, it'd be hard for me coming off the ACL injury, and one that's you're not sure how that's going to impact him, especially as he goes from college to the pros, and especially when you're looking at him potentially trying him out at tackle before moving him in. And I think that's honestly, with these prospects you're looking at, this one and the next one are probably, they're going to get their shot at tackle, but then they might move into guard quicker than what we saw Brandon Coleman last year, I felt did a decent job playing on the outside of the line, even if he might be better on the inside. I think that they would make the jump much quicker for these, given the arm length, given some of that. And when you're coming off an ACL injury and you're already questionable when it comes to power, you know, and arm strength, and with your arm size, like it makes it for a tough pick here at 29 for me with Josh Simmons.
And also, this is a guy who played 2+ years before his injury, so 2.5 years. But one of those years was at San Diego State. So really, at Ohio State, he had a 1.5 years. And you don't have a lot of tape on him. Again, he's got the size. He's got everything you look for in an offensive tackle. He played at Ohio State. That's all you really need to know. But those concerns are major concerns. The injury concerns, the lack of production over the course of time that he was in college, and in the 2+ years, 25 penalties in 2+ years. That's a red flag as well. So again, I know a lot of people like him, and there's plenty to like about him. But for Washington at pick 29, or even in their first 2 rounds, not my guy either.
Yeah, this is a one that I'm probably going to pass on at 29. Like I said, I think with a lot of these guys, I just don't see them being the best player available at 29. And that's where I'm at with the draft. I'm always a best player available guy. I think that's where Adam Peters is, and I have a hard time believing Josh Simmons is the best player at 29. If they move back, maybe in the 40s, you can see him being the best player available, but again, not where I see Washington potentially trying to go with their first pick. Now, this next guy is actually someone I have to say I secretly like. Don't know that I want him at 29, but I do like Kelvin Banks Jr. out of Texas. Athletic, explosive. He is only 6'4".
Yeah, that's a problem.
He is a guard. He is listed as a tackle. He's going to get drafted, and they're going to say offensive tackle. But make no mistake about it, Banks Jr. is a guard.
You're calling it.
I'm calling it. Calling it. He is a guard. Yeah. Now, here's something for you, Stoner. We happen to already have a Longhorn, athletic, explosive guard on the roster. Currently sidelined with an injury. But Banks Jr. could be that left explosive athletic guard from Texas filling out the line for the Washington Commanders. What did you like about Banks Jr.?
Well, first of all, the disrespect for Nick Allegretti is really starting to get to me because I see it everywhere.
Yeah.
I see it everywhere except in the coaching decisions for the Commanders. I don't see it there. They didn't talk about moving Brandon Coleman to left guard. We all talked about it. Not this guy isn't we, but everybody around the team has talked about moving him to left guard. But even when they had both Coleman and Lucas playing, they still had Allegretti playing left guard. I like Allegretti. We got to stop killing Allegretti. Or
I think he is a quality guard, but I think that he can be replaced.
Okay, that's fair enough. And getting back to this Kelvin Banks Jr., Texas, 6'5", 315. He's got those 33.5-inch arms. He's got those gator arms.
6'5" is generous.
You're right. He's more closer to 6'4". From what I've seen and what I've read about is that there's a lot of people projecting him, just like you, to be a guard. And what I'm seeing and reading, he's just too darn good to move into be a guard. He's just too good.
He's pretty exciting to watch. I will say that. I hate to admit that of the Longhorns being a Sooner, but I like what I see when it comes to him.
Yeah, I mean, he's 42 games that he started over 3 years there at Texas. I mean, that's pretty good. He's never had one of those major injuries. He is quick. He's got all the moves, very fluid. He's got great hands. He's got everything when you watch him. His leverage is fantastic. He's got all of that. The only thing he doesn't have is the measurables. He is a little bit short and he's got those shorter arms, but the production at left tackle is there. So I would caution against moving him in. Still not a guy I would take at 29, but he is a guy who I think you can plug in on day one for a team that needs him. Draft for need. Hello. A team that needs him. Plug him in, and he's probably going to be an everyday starter for years to come. He's won all the major awards in college for offensive linemen. I like him a lot. I just not for my team. He's not a guy who I would bring in and replace what they have right now.
Yeah, I think that's also just generally speaking for you. You just don't think Washington needs to go line at all,
Right?
and
That's
so
true.
when you're, I think that clouds your judgment a little bit when it
However,
comes to this. I think this is the first one realistically looking at that could be the best player available at 29 when Washington picks. I feel that there's a lot to like on him. PFF has him at 19, and he was listed quite high on a couple other big boards that I was looking at on this, and he is listed as going to be a good starter within 2 years. And I know it's crazy to sit there and just be automatically, because like you said, the production's there as far as him on the outside. But I just feel like this is the team that drafts him needs to move him to the inside immediately, get him those reps and stuff. And this is definitely the first guy on the list over Z-Man, over Booker, over Simmons. This is the first guy on the list. Not only could I see being the best player available at 29, but I could see be a day one starter for Washington and add, give Washington some more flexibility on the line with what they want to do and have a good lineman. I know I consider him a quality backup in Allegretti. But he's a good lineman, but wouldn't be great to improve there because he wasn't special. Wouldn't it be great to get a guy who can move and pull and do the things that we see in Sam Cosmi? Because to me, the difference between Cosmi and Allegretti are significant. Okay. And so now you get a Banks Jr. who's closer to Cosmi and ability, and you're talking about being able to pull left, pull right, and being able to do those fancy things and not just be a solid pass blocker or run blocker, but actually a difference maker and a guy who's going to pancake the likes of some of those in the Mean Green Machine.
Yeah.
I just feel like Banks Jr. could be an improvement over what Washington has right now.
Well, I think what a big mistake that a lot of teams make, or a lot of guys who are in charge of teams, rosters, general managers, what they make is that they have they're slow in realizing that they made a mistake, right? So if you made a mistake with Nick Allegretti when you signed him, then you have to move on. You can't sort of build on to that mistake, and because you don't want to admit it, you don't want your ego, you don't want to sort of get flogged publicly for not making the proper decision on Nick Allegretti. You got to move on, and you got to draft a guy like Kelvin Banks to replace him. Or if you made a mistake in Brandon Coleman and he can't handle whatever it is, and he's just a backup, then you just can't pile onto that by throwing him out there every single week and getting your quarterback killed. So if that's the case, I'm fine with them drafting a guy like a Kelvin Banks to replace what they have now if they feel it's going to make their team better. Today, they can't get a guy who they're going to develop over the course of a couple of years because this team is not built that way.
Sure.
They have all kinds of veterans that are on these shorter deals, 1 and 2 year deals. They don't have a lot of draft picks. They're in win now mode. They saw what they have with Jaden Daniels, and they said, okay, we're going for it now. So you can't waste such a valuable pick, whether it's 29 or 36 or 40, whatever it's going to be, on a guy who's just going to sit and develop for a couple of years.
Yeah, don't think this
plug
next
right
year
in.
is going to sit and develop. As far as the Allegretti thing,
Yeah.
last thing to mention here before going to shifting that conversation to Wednesday is he's only due a base salary of $2 million this year. So I mean, they signed him for 3 years, $16 million. That's not like super, studded, stats, right? Like that's, I mean, this is a guy, when you take a look at his previous snap percentage, you're talking about a guy who was a backup in Kansas City for the 5 years that he was there, only seeing starter snaps in his sophomore year, really. And so I just, to me, if you can make that improvement on the line, you make the improvement on the line. If Banks Jr. is the best player available for you at 29, which is debatable. It would not be debatable, in my opinion, if Will Campbell falls down to 29. This is a guy who could easily be picked in the top 10 of this draft.
Yeah.
But as we mentioned with all the prospects here, while they're listed at tackle, size-wise, arm length-wise, they're probably more like guards. They'll get their chance on the outside, but don't be surprised if in a few years you hear their name being called in the guard position. Will Campbell's no different. And in fact, he's Mr. Fundamental, and he's got that position flex. He's played along the line. He is a rarity in that he can play all 5 positions on the line, and he's a little bit familiar with somebody important on our roster, Stoner. Does that make a difference for you with Will Campbell?
I don't think that makes a difference for me, but just looking at his measurables and his production, this is a classic for me. This is a classic overthink type of guy. When you look at his size and his arm length, and you say he's best fit to play guard, this is a tackle for me. This is a guy who's whoever drafts him, they're gonna plug him day one, and he's gonna be their starting tackle for the next 10 years. And within a couple of years, he's going to be an all-pro. I think a lot of Will Campbell. He is Mr. Fundamental at 6'6" and 319. How the heck do you only have 32 and a half or whatever it is, 32 and 5/8 inch arms? Yeah. I don't get how that happens. But he played at LSU. He played at the top of the top in the best conference in football for 3 years, played 38 games in 3 years. That's an average of 13 games a year. And he allowed 5 sacks in 3 years in over 2,500 snaps. This is a classic overthink. Oh, his arms are too short. He's got to play guard. Nope. Put him out there at tackle, and you'll be super satisfied that you did. I love everything about him. I think he's going to be very solid for whoever takes him. If Washington takes him, I don't know what you're going to do with him, because he is that. What are you going to do? Play him at right tackle? Because
it'd have to be right tackle, which would be a change of pace for him.
Yeah.
But like I said, he has experience on all 5 spots on the line there. But
I like him a lot.
There's very little not to like with him. Like, I mean, you mentioned the arm length, but outside of that, this guy just does everything right. And I mean, he's athletic too. So he does struggle laterally, which is interesting to me, which honestly probably speaks to him needing to be on the outside a little bit more, because you won't need to do a lot of the pulls and stuff that you would want with a lateral movement. You just have him protect either side, on that. I like Will Campbell, and some list him as the number 1 prospect here. I didn't, but there's a lot to like about Mr. Fundamental here, but possibly not as exciting as our next player. And that's Armand M, athletic, coordinated out of Mizzou,
Yeah.
Missouri here, my number one, and likely a top 10 pick as well with Will Campbell there. So unlikely we're going to see either of these, which is why I'm not going to spend too much time on them. But though this is another one, definitely if he falls down to 29, is the best player available.
Like that.
And if Washington takes him, Washington fans should be happy. If they trade back so somebody else can take him, you should also be happy. Because like I said, I don't necessarily see the need for the line, which is where you try. That's where you measure, weigh in the best player available versus the need thing. I don't need him, but he's the best player available. Maybe somebody else does need him, and you trade back. You try to find that partner. But if you're forced to take him, you're fine with this selection here, in my opinion. What about you?
Yeah, I mean, that's the same. It would remind me if this was the case, and it's not going to be the case. He's not going to be there at 29, but it would remind me of what they did with Johnny Newton last year. And we've talked about that quite a bit. You had to take Johnny Newton in the second round because he had a first round grade and he was available, even though you had 3 defensive tackles that you were at that time you were happy with Payne, Allen, and Mathis. But you just had to. The value was too great. I didn't like it. I still don't like it because it was not a player of need. But, man, this is a guy I would have a hard time passing up, even though I don't want them to take an offensive lineman. Because all of those things that you said. Now, he's a little bit shorter. Now, he's one of those guys that's 6'4", but he's over 330 pounds, and he's got those gator arms. He's got those 33.5-inch arms. And that's what's going to perplex a lot of teams that has these shorter arms. But if you run a 4.91 at 330 pounds on the offensive line, and you have a 32-inch vertical, and you can squat over 600 pounds, that's the kind of guy that's gonna change somebody's offensive line for the better. And what I found when reading on him a little bit, the 18% body fat for a guy that's 332 pounds, that's pretty incredible that he only has that much. And Nathan, you'll like this if you didn't see this, a 1.63 10-yard split in his 40-yard dash. He gets off the ball with quickness.
He was the number one athletic scorer for the combine. For all of the tackles in this draft, he ranks number one in athleticism. Broad jump of 9.7, bench press 31. The guy is very, very big, very strong, and very quick. He is exactly what you would want in a prospect. Potentially has to move inside for some size reasons, but I like these big guys that can move like gazelles, and this is one of them, and would be an immediate improvement to the line. And like I said, you get the best player available and you figure out the rest. You got a 3rd round pick last year who played some guard. Maybe he fills on the inside. Wiley as a backup. Tell me you don't like that as a concept. Tell me you don't like that as a concept. The guy is a solid tackle in the NFL. And if you have somebody who's better than him and you move him to your backup position, that's an improvement overall on the line.
The great thing about Washington's position right now, Nathan, is that when you have a quarterback like Jaden Daniels, you don't need a great offensive line. And they proved that last year. They were not a great offensive line last year with a rookie playing left tackle and Andrew Wiley over there playing right tackle, because he can mask so many of the mistakes that the line makes just by getting out of the pocket, either naturally or the play call being that way, and getting downfield. And it makes the line look that much better. So you don't necessarily have to have this perfect offensive line with a quarterback like Jaden Daniels. However, the better your offensive line is, the better your run game is, the less you have to rely on Jaden Daniels to pull things out and make things happen. Best case scenario is you don't have Jaden Daniels running all over the place because he has to. You have him running all over the place because that's what the play call is, and that's what's most effective against the defense. So you get a guy like this and you plug him in right away and you're going to be really happy. But I will forever scream that they don't need an offensive lineman early in the draft. And if they take one, I'll be screaming and yelling. And then I'll get used to it and you'll sell me on it of how good he is and like a Johnny Newton and all that. And I'm still not sold on Johnny Newton, but
you're going to
we'll
be
see.
pleasantly surprised this year.
We'll see. But do you have a thing about drafting he's a right tackle, or he's played right tackle his whole career at Missouri. Do you have a thing that, well, if he's a right tackle, maybe his value is not as high as a guy who plays left tackle?
Yeah, and I mean, that's why this is so hard with this entire draft, because you have the entirety, including Armand here. You just don't know. Some of the measurables are there and some of the tape is there, but you have a guy, like you said, who's a right tackle. Right tackles aren't positionally valuable at too high in the draft. Same with guards. You tend to not take guards in the first round because their position value isn't there, because the difference in a really good guard and a good guard tends to not be as significant, right? Whereas like your difference in your left tackles, like your good left tackles versus your developmental left tackles, there's a big difference. There's a reason why those guys go in the top 10. And I don't think we have a clear-cut left tackle in this draft. And I don't think a right tackle is going to get picked anywhere. You know, he'll probably go in the teens. Double digits is where I think that he's going to end up. And a lot of those other guys are going to fall and be available for Washington. And there is some, when you're looking at best player available, you do kind of, I guess, look at position value in there, but largely just because, again, your best safeties, your best cornerbacks, your best linebackers and stuff are going to be significantly better and more impactful than your best guards.
Yeah. Are any of these guys worthy of moving up for?
No. I would be very disappointed if Washington moved up for any of these players.
I tend to agree that I don't think any of them are worthy of moving up for or needed to move up for. And that's the age-old debate. Best player available, are they worthy of it, or do they need to? Drafting for need? I don't think any of these guys fit either of those buckets at 29.
Yeah. And again, there's Will Campbell and Armand would be best player available at 29, but
okay.
You got to find a draft. You probably find a trade partner in that regard. Although I wouldn't be disappointed if those two names get called on draft day. We've got more top fives coming for you. Make sure you hit that like button for this video. Subscribe to our channel so you can get more of those top fives. And of course, join the conversation on Wednesday, 7:30 Eastern, where we're going to talk a little bit more about those position needs. And if there's an offensive lineman that you wanted us to talk about, let us know in the comment section so we can take a look and add them to our list when we get to it on Wednesday. I'm Nathan. That's the Stoner here on Ref the District. And until next time,
draft for need, Nathan, always.
Be a fan.